Greetings, y'all. I have an update to my previous You Are Underpaneled video based on my experience with my new to me rig, my Suburban, since August, and the fridge that I've been using, the Starlink Mini that I recently acquired, and some new research that I found that changes some of the calculations I was making previously. Let's review the basics. How much solar power can you expect to generate in the winter? If you're going to be a nomad in the desert in the winter, you have to use that for your calculations as a baseline for how much solar you're going to need. It's possible to get about 8 hours of sunlight, but of those hours, 3 are typically when you can get the most sun, and the other 5 hours are going to generate much less. I'll do that math for you. It's a whopping 405 watt hours for the day using a 100 watt panel. The second part of the equation is understanding the capacity of your battery in watt hours. And part 3, knowing how many watts all of your devices use in an average 24-hour period. These are the calculations I did in my previous video. Now that I've actually used my induction cooktop, my refrigerator, and now my Starlink Mini, I have some adjustments to make in my calculations. The biggest change is with the 12-volt refrigerator, which typically doesn't run 24 hours unless the ambient temperature is too high. The research I found done by somebody with the proper tools and doing the proper math arrived at a 14 watt-hour usage instead of 45. So instead of the original 1200 watts I thought it might be using, it's quite a bit lower now. But again, if I'm traveling where it's warm, I have to keep that in mind. That is a huge difference and a game changer in terms of determining how long your juice is going to last. The second adjustment I needed to make for calculations in order to have an accurate picture of my draw from my devices was the estimation I made for my induction cooktop. Instead of my estimated 15 minutes, it's actually closer to half an hour when I'm using the device. But because I've been willing to do this solar math and I realize I have this surplus now, it doesn't concern me. The third adjustment I needed to make was include the draw from the Starlink Mini I recently acquired. If you're considering getting one of these, there are a couple things you need to know. The limit on the plan is 50 gigs, which you can blow through pretty quickly. You can also add 1 gig at a time, and you can switch to the unlimited level, but just know that you can't switch back to the 50 gig level once you've done that. Especially adjusting for the fridge, which gave me more juice to work with, the induction cooktop, and adding the Starlink Mini, I went from about 2,000 watts on a high usage day down to about 1,500 watts. Now I can determine, am I underpaneled? To do that, I need to be willing to figure out my usage draw and then understand the capacity of my battery in watt hours. Some sources recommend not letting your charge falling below 20%, and in my case, that would be just a tad above 400 watts. We'll see where that comes in a minute. I know my usage draw, I know my battery capacity. Now let's figure out what my winter solar harvesting capacity is. We already know that per 100 watt panel, it's possible to generate about 400 watts on your average winter day. I have 400 watts of panel on my roof, so I can generate just over 1,600 watts a day. If I subtract my estimated 1,515 watts of usage, that's not a lot of leeway, especially if I'm supposed to have this 20% buffer. However, on normal usage days, I don't use my rice cooker. Starlink Mini is for when I can't hook up to my T-Mobile. I rarely use my water kettle, and some days I don't use my induction cooktop at all. So a normal day of usage for me is somewhere between 700 and 1,500 watts, which is well within the range of what I can generate with my 400 watts of solar, and keeping in mind that 20% I want to have as a buffer. Feel free to use this 3-step process and this template of my usage in order for you to figure out, are you underpaneled? Feel free to leave any questions in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching and see you down the road.